This is 1815 map of Europe. Now, for those of you who need glasses, I hope you can squint in and see it. But this, you see many empires. The Ottoman Empire, the Austrian Empire, the Spain Empire, and so on. We don't hear any empires anymore nowadays, right? So much for that. And it happened so quickly. I'm trying to put you a little bit in the context of the time before we go to some of the richer subjects. A picture of the Sultan of Turkey, Queen Victoria, and Napoleon III when they were younger, I presume. Yeah. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, 1863, 1865 time era. I thought this might be kind of interesting. Again, these are from Wikipedia. It says that some 5 million Irish came to US between 1830 and 1914. That's a lot of people when you think about immigration and things to that nature nowadays, what you hear. So there was a lot of things happening as far as these aspects. The other one was the Suez Canal, first vessels in 1869. Now, I'm just going to go over some of these other pieces of, this is like a random way of getting a feel for certain things that happen. If somebody would like to read, I can, I suppose with Jeremiah, I don't know if it's going to work out. Jeremiah, one of these? Oh, okay. Who would like to read? Jim. Jim is looking at me, so yeah, Jim.
Doesn't mean I want to read. All right, where do you want me to start?
Don't read it too fast, but like read this whole screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
1800, John Adams is the first president to live at the White House, which was originally called the Executive Mansion.
Did you know what's called Executive Mansion? I didn't know. Good, great. Okay.
The Library of Congress was established by Congress in 1800. It was set up as the research library of the United States Congress, and the library's primary mission was for researching inquiries made by members of Congress. The library is open to the public and is the largest library in the world by shelf space and holds the largest number of books.
Is that still the case? Anybody knows? Anybody
haven't
been
been.
to the Library of Congress? You've been there?
No, I think that's still true.
That's true? Okay. Susie agrees it's true, so it must be true.
Okay.
Okay.
You can Google
Please, Google it. Yeah,
Put
right.
it into your Googler. And then.
Google it. Okay.
All right. In 1804, New Jersey becomes the last northern state to emancipate its slaves. Maryland was first in 1788. In 1814, British burned down Washington, D.C. during the War of 1812. Many of the public buildings, including the White House and the U.S. Capitol building.
So some of these things happening in that time era. Jim, you're doing a great job, so I'll go to the next one. Okay, please.
1825, aluminum is discovered. 1826, the first photographs were made. First African-American newspaper, Freedom's Journal, was published in New York City on March 16, 1827. The paper was mostly banned in the South. The first typewriter referred to typewriter was made in 1829.
Now, did you know that, typewriter? No. That would have been nicer to keep it typewriter. Why typewriter, huh? Okay.
Queen Victoria ascends the throne in 1837. In 1837, Native American Cherokee Indians were marched from their homelands in Georgia, the Carolinas, and eastern Tennessee to the new Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma, in the western United States during the forced march. 4,000 of the 15,000 Cherokee Indians died during the march. I think it was called, isn't that called the March of Tears?
Yes, March of Tears.
Trail of Tears,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So there was some sad news, some happy news. There was a lot happening at that time. Okay, let's see. And there's, I think it is one more. Okay. Is it off?
Oh, no, here we go. Britain takes Hong Kong in 1842.
Now, before we go that, you hear a lot of news about Hong Kong. Also, it happened, the starting process was in 1842. Okay.
1844 saw Morris's first electronic telegram. The first message was sent on May 24th, 1844. What hath God wrought? Taken from the Bible, Numbers 23:23.
That's interesting, isn't it? Like the first time that mode of communication was made, they used the Bible, a verse from the Bible. Okay.
Florida became the 27th state of the United States of America in 1845.
Yay! So that's when it happened here. Right?
U.S.-Mexican War, 1846 to 1848, resulted in Mexico agreeing to the sale of its northern territories in the United States for $15 million, which included Texas, California, and New Mexico.
Isn't that something? 15 million, huh? Wow.
1861, the American Civil War starts. In 1897, UK abolished slave trade.
Thanks very much. I think that's about our recapping a little bit. So there was and this is just a sample, there was a lot of things happening in that time era. And it's beyond the scope of the evening to compare that to other time eras and see, did they pick up? Or was it the same? Or whatever? And how many issues is touched on? There was also a recurrence of these expectations all over the world, Christian world as well as Europe, North America, and Middle East as well, about something more was in the air, was supposed to happen. Something more spiritual, something more that people were expecting. The time for it is getting to happen. In the West, many of the people that you're going to see some names here, looks like they really took their time to study the Bible and various aspects of society, not just the clergy, but some judges, some people, Navy, and so on. They had this interest to really study the Bible. And they came up with all kinds of understanding and expectations of certain things were supposed to happen based on their reading of different passages of the Bible. They were expecting a promised one to come. Some even predicted the time of the manifestation of, from the Baha'i point of view, how those promises are fulfilled by the Bab and Baha'u'llah. And some even came with very exact dates based on their reading of the passages from the Bible. And the same in the Middle East from passages from the Quran. And we're going to hear some names. And here I want to express a debt of gratitude to our friend Ahang Rabbani, who passed away many years ago. He did a remarkable work of researching this data that I just extracted and sharing with you. I don't know how much time he spent on each one of these. He puts the source, the book, where it came from. And if you are interested, I have a copy of that and I can give it to you as well. But here's a sample now. So who would like to read? Michael? Yeah? Now the names, the name might test your ability to pronounce them properly, but that's okay, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's from Canada.
Some of the more prominent of these individuals in alphabetical order include Pierre Agier, 1748 to 1823. He was a French lawyer, elevated to judgeship of the appeal court in 1802, and author of many books. After extensive research, he concluded the second coming would occur between 1838 and 1848.
Now that's remarkable, huh? This is a person, again, not a clergy, but he came up with these dates from his study of the Bible. Yes, please.
Z. Armstrong, 1771 to 1827, was a pastor in New Jersey. In 1815, organized a series of conferences on John's Revelation and in these lectures predicted demise of the papacy, establishment of Israel under the sovereignty of the second Messiah. John Bacon, 1738 to 1820, a very prominent political and judicial figure in Massachusetts, using two different ways of computing the return based on the Bible, he came up with years 1866 and 1926. Wow. Joseph Bates, 1792 to 1872, a Marine officer of the British Navy. He spent a long time studying Bible and prophecies, wrote extensively on biblical interpretations, and predicted the time of second coming at the 12th of October, 1844. Wow. John Bayford, at the beginning of the 19th century, was a member of the group that began teaching Christianity to the Jews. He organized many conferences for this purpose, predicted 1844 as the year of appearance of Christ.
You know, and it's remarkable. Can you imagine if you could put yourself in their shoes, and they get excited and they're waiting, but then that expectation again was based on certain things that they felt needs to be fulfilled, maybe visibly in some cases, and if it didn't happen, the disappointment that, oh, gee, I thought I had got it right, so there must be something wrong in the way I understood it. Okay. Who would like to read these ones? Susie, would you like to read?
Oh, God. Okay. Abretch, is that how you say that? Abretch John Bengal, 1687 to 1752, a great German scholar and professor of divinities. He had immense influence in shaping the religious scholarship and divinity studies of the period. Wrote extensively, one of his books is devoted to summary of his research on the book of Revelation. In this book, he anticipated the year of appearance to be 1836. David Bernard, a Baptist minister, in a letter dated 2 January 1843, wrote, "With certainty, the fulfillment of the prophecy about 2300 will be witnessed at the end of 1843. James Bicheno, not sure where he was, what year he was born, 1831, a minister in England, and through many writings considered the French Revolution as a sign for the second coming. He also stated that Daniel's prophecy about 2300 commenced at 418 BC, and hence anticipated that 1811 events would lead to the reformation of the world. He predicted that the second coming will take place in 1864.
So like in this case, he even predicted certain events need to happen worldwide before Christ would come back.
Edward Bickersteth, Bickersteth, 1786 to 1850, head of the Biblical Church of Wotton and the Secretary of Society of Heralds. He wrote 16 books, all reprinted several times. In all his writings, he predicted the commencement of Daniel's 2300 prophecy from 446 BC, hence 1854 as the year of Christ's appearance of. Do you want me to hand the microphone to someone else?
Sure.
Last one, okay. Elias Boudinot, 1740-1821, a well-known lawyer and member of Congress. He was born in Philadelphia and was one of the signatories of the peace treaty with England after the War of Independence. At one time, he was considered a potential presidential candidate. Author of many books, he predicted the second coming to occur in 1844 based on Daniel's prophecy of 2300, commencing from 456 BC, the year of Daniel's statement.
Thanks.
So
thanks
the
very
book
much.
of Daniel is a big one then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay, and I think there's one more. Who would like to read? Yes, Bill, please.
Charles Bowles, 1843, born in Boston. His father was of African ancestry, first became a Protestant and later converted to the Baptist Church, and in 1816 became a high-ranking official of the church. He was a popular speaker in the free will movement, and despite opposition to his race, progressed in the church. In his talks, he always spoke of 1843 as the year of the appearance of the promised Messiah. Joshua William Brooks, 1790 to 1882, a high-ranking member of the Church of England and writer of numerous books. He compiled an encyclopedia of the names and details of all people that have predicted the second coming. In this book, he points that due to exceptionally large number of diverse predictions during the 19th century, the day of judgment will be then. Based on Daniel's prophecy, he specifically points to 1844 as the time of return of Christ.
So in other words, from what I understand, he found that many predictions refer to 19th century to begin with. Huh? Okay.
Emile Broussais died in 1855 in France. In the year 1842, predicted the near appearance of a new world order, which will in turn commence a new order to be realized in the future centuries.
See that term New World Order introduced in that time era thing again? Yeah.
John Aquila Brown, in a book published in 1810, he predicted that the greatest historical event of all times will occur in 1843. In the course of this event, all people from all races, sects, backgrounds will be united under one tabernacle. He based his arguments on Daniel's vision.
So once again, Daniel. Thanks very much, Bill. So Daniel, yeah. So next one, we don't, is it? Is that the one you just read? Yes. Oh. Okay, there's one more. I thought there was, we skipped over that. You would, yeah, please. Yes, please.
Charles Buck, 1771 to 1815, a well-known British theological scholar and author of Useful Divinity Dictionary, which has been reprinted numerously. He wrote that the sixth trumpet blast was Islam, which will be concluded in 1844, and then the period of the seventh and final trumpet blast will commence and will last 1,000 years. He writes a great deal about the glory of this final period, including participation of the tribes of Israel, establishment of the kingdom of God, and world encircling of the word of God. Alexander Campbell, 1788 to 1866. In 1807, he and his father, Thomas Campbell, left the Presbyterian Church. He anticipated the descent of the Daniel's New Jerusalem to be fulfilled in 1830. Campbell wrote many articles and assembled a group of disciples known as Jesus students, who are still active in various parts of the world.
Has anybody heard of Jesus students by chance?
What's the next?
No? Okay. Okay, please.
David Chatteris, 1530 to 1600, a great scholar and author of many books, one of the founders of the Lutheran Church, and assisted in establishing several universities in Germany. One of his books is about John's prophecies in the book of Revelation. In there, he predicts that 1260 prophecy will be fulfilled in 1676, and that would be the year of the second coming. However, he goes on to say that the divine will is to be fulfilled in 1866 as the day of judgment. This day, he states, is the 1000th week of the second coming.
So some become almost like hard to follow the equation, but I'm sure he has a logic the way they understand. Okay.
Adam Clake, 1762 to 1832, a famous preacher of the Methodist Church from Ireland. He labored hard and mastered many of Middle Eastern and ancient languages. His best work is a series of commentaries on the Old Testament, published from 1810 to 1826. Like many other commentaries, He considered the establishment of the papacy as the beginning of 1260 in Daniel's prophecy. He further points to the French Revolution, which greatly undermined the authority of the Pope as a major signpost. He concludes that in 1844, the 2300-day prophecy will be fulfilled and the second coming will be realized.
Thanks very much. So, like for instance, who would have thought French Revolution, somebody would come to that understanding as a prelude for the second coming of Christ, and something like that had to happen. It's interesting the way these folks did their research. Right.
Because that's from the New Testament, which the 1260 to me, when I was studying the faith, represented not only the coming of Muhammad, but then the coming of Christ.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there is that aspect too. Okay, now, we won't read the rest of these fellows, but this is like the names that our friend Ahang was able to gather, and each one of them has like a description of what we just went through. So there were, and this is not all, this is just the ones that at least one human being was able to find. So there was a lot going on that people were spending time and energy trying to figure out, when is it going to happen? Oh, really? I see. Okay, now, in one of the names that I thought you may want to appreciate a little bit more is about our friend Reverend William Miller and the Millerites and Seventh-day Adventists. Who would like to read this one? Lois, would you like?
Reverend William Miller, 1782 to 1849. He was born in Massachusetts and married in 1808, then settled in Vermont. The lack of enthusiasm in the Christian community greatly disheartened him and caused him to start his study and investigation of its cause. During this time, he enlisted in Army and resigned his commission in 1816 and returned to his native home. While in Pennsylvania on 22 October 1832, he had a vision and an inspiration. This presented by far the most dramatic scenario, as he predicted that 1844 would witness the second coming of Christ, along the day of judgment and the day of resurrection. A large following gathered around him. However, at the appointed year, the promise of the second coming was not fulfilled. He died in 1849, still believing the near advent. In a later decade, his disappointed Millerites became the Seventh-day Adventists, a branch of Protestant church.
Thank you. It's kind of sad that somebody becomes so convinced and then gather a number of followers and they anticipate, but the criteria that they perhaps used to see whether their promised one has come, looks like that criteria wasn't the right one, so they missed out. It's so sad. Okay, thank you. Now, one of the groups that you may have heard, so up to now, there were individuals that studied the Bible. They came up with their own interpretation and predictions and something. Some had a following, like our Reverend Miller. Some didn't. Some tried to influence others. But now we get into one group of Christians that actually did more than that in trying to fulfill their understanding of what was going to happen. And this is the Templars. So who would like to read this one? Beverly, can you see, or you want to come closer? I don't want to strain your eyes, because at the end of a meeting, you're going to say this Don Farhat did it. Yeah? Yeah. That microphone, I don't think is on. No, it's not on. Bring it closer, please.
Can you?
It's not on. Is it on?
I did. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, right. Very good.
Bravo. The Templars are formed in Germany by Christoph Hoffmann of Wittenberg, South Germany, had observed the decline of the infusion of the church, and I've got to move closer, sorry. And my boy.
Yeah, come sit closer.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Uh, he had observed the decline of the influence of the church and attributed this to the failure of its members to live the life inculcated by Christ in the Gospels. Through the study of his scriptures, he became convinced that the second coming of Christ was imminent, and seeing the state of the church, he determined to set up a colony where people could abide by the ethical teachings of the Bible and thus be fit to be accepted by Christ on his return. His views inevitably led to a clash with the Lutheran Church, from which he and his followers were eventually expelled. His teachings, however, gained acceptance throughout Europe and in North America. Believing the second coming of Christ to be so near, Hoffman and the other leaders of the movement decided to move their colony to Palestine, where the Advent was expected to occur. Hoffman, with his principal lieutenant, George David Hardegg, landed in Haifa on 30 October 1868. Hardegg remained in Haifa as he heard of the colony, while Hoffman moved on to found the colony at Jaffa. The Haifa colony became the largest and most important of the Templar colonies in Palestine. In 1873, it numbered 170 adults and 84 children. By the end of the century, it had grown to about 1,000 persons. All the evidence seems to indicate that from the very beginning, there were close relations between the Baha'is and the German Templars, and later, Baha'u'llah is known to have lived in the colony among the Templars for a short time.
Thanks very much. You know, we're going to see some more pictures, and hopefully people who've been in Haifa area can say about Templars. In one of these books some time ago, I read about the formation of the State of Israel, and it's interesting, like around 1900, 1910, 1912, the Zionist movement from Europe, in anticipation of Christ coming back, and the thinking was that, well, Christ left from Jerusalem, so he would come back to Jerusalem, so we should make sure that Jerusalem is an open territory, that people from our denominations can go freely. And that became a very hot topic before the State of Israel was formed. It became so hot that if you research some of these things, you see even during presidential campaigns or senatorial campaigns, one was for it, one was against it, and people were debating this whole idea of Christ coming back. So these guys were a little bit ahead. And one other thing about Templars, looks like they send their young ones to go to Palestine ahead of the rest of the colony to feel the place. Because can you imagine like a group from Germany moving all the way to Palestine, which at that time was like desert. And yet they brought their technology, and this and other stories about how Baha'is in Haifa and Akka interacted with them and benefited from their presence as well. Let me show you. This is one picture I was able to find that shows the German colony in Templars in Haifa in 1875. And that must be the Bay of Haifa in the program. And this is another shot. This is the Baha'i temple, the shrine, where the resting place of the Bab. And you see those rooftops. Am I correct? The ones that are reddish? Those are the Templars' houses. And the inscription on the top of one of the windows, that when you translate, it says, "The Lord is nigh." And it was written in 1871. Came that close. Anybody else who's been at the World Center, you want to say something about the Templars that kind of struck you?
That particular house is one where Baha'u'llah actually stayed.
That house? Huh.
Yeah, he came to visit Haifa in 1891 and pitched his tent at a number of different locations around the city. And when he was pitching it right next to that house, he became ill, and they allowed him to come and stay in the house until
Oh.
he felt better. So he actually stayed in that house. But he wrote a tablet to the Haifa head
Right.
of it. Lahi Hartag is how
Yes.
it's called in
Right.
Persian.
Yeah.
And it's a very mystical tablet, and it was so mystical that Hartag couldn't figure it out. But essentially, saying you got it right. This is I'm here. So
Right.
yeah.
So the Lord literally was nigh. He's actually stated.
Hartag, Lahi Hartag, Hartag. Hartag is his name in German, but they sort of Persianized it for the name of the tablet. But there are no Germans left, and the reason is that at the end of the German colonies of the Templars sided with their homeland during World War I. So when the war was over, the British basically expelled them.
Oh, I see. I see. Oh, such disappointment. Russian what? In Haifa?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of Russian Jews, after the pogroms
Oh, Jews,
started,
yeah.
came to the Holy Land in the early part of that century too.
Now, so this was a taste for like in the Christian world, Europe, North America. At the same time, in the Middle East, the country of Persia, the country of Iraq, some of the Persian Gulf areas, there was also a lot of vibes going on and a lot of research and studies and scholars, Muslim scholars were also investigating their holy books because they were feeling that their promised one is also going to come very soon. Now, there are some names that you see here. Does anybody recognize any of these gentlemen's names? This is, again, and each one, some of these names, if you want to take more of your time, you find that in Baha'i literature that either Abdul Baha referred to or Baha'u'llah referred to some of these names. And some of these individuals, in their own ways of feeling, the time for the promised one was so close that when the message of the Bab actually reached these areas, they were all ready to embrace. So you come to see how the mystical forces of spiritual and physical are working. They were anticipating. So when the message came that he has come, they were already kind of ready to go and investigate. Two of the individuals in that area that made a difference compared to all these names that we've heard so far are known as Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim. These were again two individuals that knew the time for the promised one is very much close. The one difference about them is that they had students and they literally prepared them to go and actually investigate because they said the time is so close that you need to do that. And it was through their efforts that the Baha'i faith through the Bab was the first individual that actually received the message of the Bab, the forerunner of Baha'u'llah. This fellow's name was Mullah Hussein. I don't want to confuse some of you who may not have heard some of these names. But then it was through these two individuals and their years of efforts that some students were so prepared that they had developed the capacity that the manifestation of God, as Baha'is call the Prophet, the manifestation of God, would actually deliver his message. Because it's as another subject beyond the scope of this evening that we get so used to talking to each other, and we may take it the same way when a prophet or manifestation of God is presenting his mission. We have to have the capacity at that moment to receive it. Otherwise, they would delay it. So the concept of progressive revelation, like what Christ couldn't have said, now Baha'u'llah has said, is because that capacity is now grown, so Baha'u'llah can speak. So the same way when, for instance, the manifestation of God, Baha'u'llah himself wants to speak, the capacity has to be there. And sometimes you see some tablets are more powerful than some others because the recipient had the capacity to receive it. But in any case, these were among the two individuals that we owe a great depth of gratitude. Now, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up something
Yeah, use your microphone so you can.
It's pretty loud. Okay. The late Dr. Firuz Kazemzadeh, who was an expert in Russian as well as in Persian, and he and his father were both scholars, were able to find evidence of two other twin luminaries who, I think it was either Abdul-Baha or Shoghi Effendi also confirmed that they were also twin luminaries, much like Sheikh Ahmad and Syed Kazem, who were in the southern part of what was then the Russian Empire, in the Muslim area, it would have been the area not too far north from where Maku was.
Oh,
And so when the Bab was imprisoned in Maku, because these people had already had followers who were waiting for the promised one, and just like Syed Kazem and Sheikh Ahmad, it was the Russian ambassador who was primarily responsible for the Bab being moved to Sharik to get him further away from the Russian border because of those two other twin luminaries.
wow, very nice.
So,
Jane.
very interesting. He wrote an article, he and his father wrote jointly wrote an article on their research that was published back in the 60s, I think, or early 70s in World Order magazine that talks about these other two men in addition.
Wow.
So God, when he wants to make sure something's going to
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
has spares.
He has his own ways. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes we don't realize how. I mean, we use the term now algorithm nowadays. Those who are in computer programming, like Eugene and so on, the term algorithm, but also algorithm, like any phone you have, somebody designed. If you do this, this has to happen. If you do this, this has to happen. Well, take that algorithm of this creation and the good Lord interacting with the creation and who does the legwork for what to happen to be more receptive. So, okay, now this whole process of trying to understand more about Syed Kazem and Sheikh Ahmad, and because they provided such a groundwork, basic work for the Baha'i faith to start, it creates a very unique opportunity to really understand, like, what did they do, and to really trying to get a feel for how they went about presenting their case, brings us to one of the main reasons for having tonight's gathering. Yes, Lois. Which slide? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, okay. Sheikh Ahmad Ahsai, 1752-1825, born in 1752 in the province of Ahsa of Bahrain, that's in Persian Gulf. He was the most important expectant of the promised ones. He was the founder of the Shaykhi school within the Shia Islam, authored over 100 books and manuscripts, and taught hundreds of students who went on to proclaim the nearness of advent of the promised one. By the way, not to say too much about, because of the time aspect, Sheikh Ahmad, he became so popular. So here's an individual who's preaching the promised one is coming, but he became so popular that the king of Persia asked for an audience with him. Can you imagine? and the king says to one of his letters to him, he says, it would be easier for you to come to my palace compared to me coming to your residence, which at that time he had gone to Persia. Says, because the king says, because if I were to come, I had to bring something like 10,000 other people with me. That's what the protocol called for. I don't know what the protocol now is. 10,000. And he says, the demand on food, it would cause a famine in your area. So he uses that logic. He says, no, it makes sense for you to come and see me. And he did. And he was revered very much, Sheikh Ahmad, by the king of Persia, by many of his sons who were in very key positions, and they all revered him. And because he was very popular that way, the Orthodox, for instance, Muslims, from which he had come, they were very forgiving to his teachings. His teachings, he would explain, like, for instance, what does it mean? Because in Islam, for instance, talking about it, there's a tradition that one night Muhammad, in that mosque that you see is very famous in Palestine area, he went up to seventh heaven, and then he came back one night. Well, some Muslims, for instance, take that literally, that he physically went up. People like Sheikh Ahmad would say, no, these are all symbolic. it means like this, it means like that. And he would extrapolate and explain to them. But some Orthodox people didn't feel comfortable, but he became gradually very popular. Then one of his students, then he appointed to carry on the work, and this is Sayyid Kazem Rashti. And he was the heir to Sheikh Ahmad Ahsai. He was the teacher of the first 18 individuals who recognized the Promised One. When he appeared in 1844, they became known as the Letters of the Living. Residing most of his life in Karbala, Iraq, Sayyid Kazem authored great many books and treatises explaining passages of the Holy Scriptures concerning the Promised One and his imminent coming. So all that good work that all these folks in Europe did, and all those names that we mentioned, but we didn't, because of time, didn't go through it, in Middle East area did, resulted in those individuals literally finding the Promised One. You know, sometimes when you read some of these things, you see what a long process it is. That we may want something right away, but God in his own ways does things in his own way, little by little. So coming back to this book, this is a book known as the Dawn Breakers. This is the chronicle of the early part of the Promised One's history. In the Baha'i faith, the Promised One is referred to as the Bab and Baha'u'llah. The Bab was a prophet, just like Baha'u'llah, except two of them come, one about 19 years between the two. And this is the first time that it has happened. So the Bab is like John the Baptist, and Baha'u'llah is like Christ. But imagine if John the Baptist was like another Christ in a way. So, and there are many traditions, and if you want to take a scholarly way to the time of twin manifestations, that it has never happened before. So this book contains all the things about our two friends, Sayyid Kazem and Sheikh Ahmad, and the Promised One, the Bab, all the circumstances related to their lives. Now I'm a little bit ahead of myself. Let me read the description. Okay, who would like to read this one? Who hasn't read yet? Who would? Kathy, would you like to, please?
The Guardian undertook the translation of the first part of Nabil's narrative, published in 1932 as The Dawnbreakers. Concurrent with the period when these first illuminating letters on such major subjects were streaming from the pen of Shoghi Effendi, he undertook the translation of two books. In a letter written on 4 July 1930, Shoghi Effendi says, "I feel exceedingly tired after a strenuous year of work, particularly as I have managed to add to my labors the translation of the Gagan, which I have already sent to America." This was the first of his major translations, Baha'u'llah's great exposition on the station and role of the manifestations of God, more particularly in the light of Islamic teachings and prophecies known as the Kitab-i-Igan, the Book of Book of Certitude. It was an invaluable adjunct to the Western Baha'is in their study of the faith they had embraced and infinitely enriched their understanding of divine revelation. During that same year, 1929 to 1930, the Guardian began work on the second book, published during this period. A work that was neither a translation of Baha'u'llah's words nor one of Shoghi Effendi's general letters, but which must be considered a literary masterpiece and one of his most priceless gifts for all time. This was the translation of the first part of the narrative, compiled by a contemporary follower of both the Bab and Baha'u'llah, known as Nabil, which was published in 1932 under the title The Dawnbreakers. Hand of the cause, Rahia Khan.
Thank you. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the term the Guardian, this is the grandson of Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, who became the official guardian of the Baha'i faith. He had numerous responsibilities at a young age, but one of them he set for himself the translation of the Dawnbreakers because it was so important. Now, the book, The Dawnbreakers, has made one of the three of the individuals that the Guardian thanked for their efforts were three Western ladies, and it's interesting. Starting from left, Lady Blomfield from England, and then next is I forget her name. Imogene Hoek, yes. She's from North America. And then Effie Baker from Australia. Now, each one played a unique part. Effie Baker, if you take the book, you see all kinds of pictures in it.